It seems every day politics becomes more hateful and vitriolic. If you turn on the news and listen to political pundits, it is clear both sides are angry, and it appears the left and the right have become more polarized. And worst of all, each side sees those on the other as operating from dark intentions or ignorance. In other words, we do not think those on the other side of the political aisle are operating from reason or ethical considerations. We tend to see our political side as the force of good and reason, whereas the other side is filled with a bunch of ignorant bigots. But honestly, do you really think everyone on the other side of the political aisle is ignorant or stupid and purely out to destroy all that is good because they are spiteful bigots? If you truly believe you're on the side of reason when it comes to politics, then I ask you to employ that here and set aside your bias and emotions for the time being. Perhaps the reason members of the other side disagree with you is not because they are stupid bigots, but because they have a different understanding of human nature, and therefore are operating from different presuppositions about what is possible in politics. The philosopher Thomas Sowell wrote an important and often overlooked book, A Conflict of Visions. In the book, he lays out how there have been two general camps of political philosophers. One camp reflects most people that gravitate towards the right, and the other reflects most people that gravitate towards the left. The main difference between the two general camps as to why they disagree so much on politics stems from how each group views human nature. The first camp holds to a constrained view of human nature. The second group holds to an unconstrained view of human nature. Philosophers like Adam Smith, Edmund Burke, Friedrich Hayek, Alexander Hamilton will lean towards the view that man is constrained, whereas William Godwin, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, G.A. Cohen, and George Bernard Shaw lean towards the idea the nature of man is unconstrained. The difference is not black and white, it is more of a spectrum, where the first group gravitates more to the constrained view of human nature, and the other group gravitates more towards the unconstrained view. What we want to show is that often when one leans more towards a constrained or unconstrained view of human nature, that will likely determine which way they lean politically. People on the right tend to hold to a constrained view of human nature, whereas people on the left tend to hold to more of an unconstrained view. And this is one reason why no one understands why the other side advocates for the policies that they do. Let's cover the constrained view of human nature first. People who hold to this view tend to see humans as bound by a fixed nature that has a strong influence on how they act and live. This doesn't mean one's nature determines everything they do, and there's no room for free will. The view is human nature constrains or limits what is possible for humans to do. Humans evolved in a world where species often have to compete for survival. Since this is a dominant factor in environments that humans evolved in, it has created characteristics that constrain how humans will act. For example, humans will more than likely not act out of virtuous intent, but will act out of self-interest or live in a way that will maximize their own and their immediate family's interests. In other words, we evolved to survive and put our own interests first. This is a psychological factor that determines how we think and act. Many Christians who reject the theory of evolution often still gravitate towards this view of humanity because of the Christian doctrine of the fall and total depravity. Humans have a sinful nature that constrains the way they can live and think, which accounts for why most Christians gravitate towards the right. Because humans are constrained by a fallen or self-interested nature, it limits the types of societies and political institutions we can create. Often those who hold to more of a constrained view do not think utopia could ever be achieved, and we sort of have to live with what we got and make the most of it. The view is captured best by Immanuel Kant, who said, "Out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made." Therefore, since humans are considered imperfect, they will always create imperfect societies. No one is capable of being a central planner and forming a utopia without any problems. As Milton Friedman once asked, "Just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us." Because of this constrained view, it naturally follows that limits on a government's ability should be set. We cannot trust a government to have too much power to structure society, because the humans in charge, whoever they might be, will not act in ways for the service of humanity, but will act out in ways that advance their own self-interest. This is the reasoning behind the three branches of the US government. Too much power in one branch will result in whoever is in charge using their power to advance their own self-interest and amass more power and control. Most who hold to a constrained view are not anarchists. As George Washington said, government is a necessary evil. The constrained vision advocates that the best solution is a limited government that sets certain laws to protect life, property, and reduce harm. Humans are best left to their own devices without central planners telling them how to live. Thomas Hobbes said, "A plain husbandman is more prudent in the affairs of his house than a privy councillor in the affairs of other men." This will obviously not result in a utopian society, because humans are still constrained by their nature. But it is better for humans to look after their own affairs because their focus will be on their own self-interest, and likely the interest of their families. But a minimal government is still needed to secure liberties and allow humans to work on their own devices without external threats. One on this view often advocates for capitalistic policies, which seeks to focus the self-interest of humans. People are required to compete with other producers to earn customers, and therefore must keep costs low and quality high to earn a living. Additionally, wisdom of the past is pivotal for deciding what has worked and what will work best for forming a functioning society. Laws and societies have already evolved through trial and error throughout time. Edmund Burke said government requires more experience than one person can gain in his whole life. Studying the past and understanding what has worked is necessary to achieve optimal results. Many holding to a constrained vision also see religion as necessary and a vital societal institution that helps to tame the self-centered nature of man. Therefore, religious institutions are seen as an essential pillar of society that helps to establish order and reduce problems. Now, one could easily pick this system apart and find areas where problems will arise. But this vision acknowledges this deficiency and accepts it. Men are considered imperfect in the constrained vision. Therefore, societies and governments can never be perfect. The vision seeks trade-offs instead of utopian solutions. It is more about forming a functioning society than directing society towards idealistic goals. For example, humans will always be unequal in various ways, and achieving total equality is impossible. So the pursuit of equal rights and equal opportunities is sought after instead. The unconstrained vision seeks solutions to issues, like the lack of equality, while the constrained vision accepts that there are none and pursues other avenues to create an optimal society. Speaking of the unconstrained vision, let's cover that one now. To have an unconstrained vision of humanity is not to deny that humans have a nature we evolved with, but to believe we are able to modify it or transcend it. Those of the unconstrained vision focus more on how environments shape us into what we are. If we live in a capitalistic society that teaches we ought to seek wealth and capital, that will create individuals that prize greed and prosperity. If extraterrestrials abducted a baby and took her to a world which was a utopia where all were equal, she would be raised in a world that cared more about equality and charity. So that would foster a nature in her that did not chase after wealth and prosperity. On the constrained vision, human nature results in imperfect societies. But on the unconstrained vision, the society or environments we live in shape and modify human nature. Changing the society in drastic ways for the better will create better individuals. The unconstrained vision is best captured by the statement of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." It is society or the environments we live in that turn us into self-interested and greedy creatures, instead of creatures that prize charity and equality. Unlike on the constrained vision, religious institutions are sometimes seen as part of the problems of the current society. They either need to be modified or done away with for society to advance. Since political philosophers of the unconstrained vision believe a human is born unconstrained by a fallen or self-interested nature, they then believe humans can be transformed into better creatures if societal institutions change for the better. If the right people were in charge and they had enough power, they could modify things to make society better. According to Robert A. Dahl, delegation to experts has become an indispensable aid to rational calculation in modern life. Whereas those of the constrained vision are skeptical of central planners, those on the unconstrained vision often embrace them as they are necessary to reconstruct and change societal institutions for the better. Within this view, it is believed that once the proper societal institutions are in place, humans will be taught how to live more virtuously. Crime and greed will be reduced, and humans will be able to focus on more noble things. George Bernard Shaw said, "Evil in the existing society is neither incurable nor even very hard to cure when you have diagnosed it scientifically." Wisdom from the past is often avoided or not prized as much for those with the unconstrained vision. Past approaches at forming societies have resulted in imperfections. Therefore, building on what has previously worked is minimized, and new approaches must be sought after to try and achieve a more ideal or utopian society. Knowledge on how to change may come from those who have not been corrupted by time as much, like the young. As one philosopher said, a young man leaving school possesses more real knowledge than the greatest geniuses, not of antiquity, but even of the 17th century, could have acquired after long study. The institutions of society have been shaped by humans who have been building off the wisdom of the past, and they did not create a utopian society. So new ideas and solutions are necessary to try and get humanity to a better place, instead of trying the same old that didn't fix the problems we find in the world. Those of the unconstrained vision often focus more on goals for society, rather than how it should function in its current state. For example, someone operating from the unconstrained vision may speak of creating a world where healthcare is a right, or poverty is non-existent. Political policies are often advocated for with the sense of achieving certain ideal goals, whereas those operating from a constrained vision prefer focusing on policies that refer more to functionality. Someone operating from a constrained vision may seek to establish a society with a free market, without reference to goals like achieving equality or eliminating poverty entirely. It is more about how humans with a constrained nature can function in a society they create. Whereas on the unconstrained vision, it is more about how we can modify society to make the world a more virtuous place. Now, as I noted, this is not a black and white concept. It is more of a spectrum that we tend to fall on. Many people are neither entirely in agreement with either of these two views, but still gravitate towards one or the other. And often these two views of human nature are assumed when it comes to politics. And therefore, neither side really understands where the other is coming from. An extraterrestrial would get two different views of what humans are if he read William Godwin's inquiry concerning political justice and if he read the Federalist Papers. So perhaps the reason we don't understand why people on the other side of the aisle advocate for the policies that they do is because they are operating from different assumptions about what humans are and what is possible in politics. We don't understand the assumptions the other side has, and more than likely, presuppose they have the same view of what humans are that we do. But in reality, neither side is on the same page. Let's take the issue of universal basic income. Should the government provide basic income to all its citizens? Those of the unconstrained vision see this as a good thing, because giving additional money to those in poverty will help change the environment many of these people live in. They will be able to cover basic costs for food and housing, and having better living conditions means they will be better people. Those who hold to the constrained vision see universal basic income as a political nightmare. Giving humans free money that are constrained to act out in self-interest will not make things better, but make humans more lazy and spoiled. Most won't use the additional income to better themselves or society, but use it for self-gratification, knowing the next check from the government will come next month without repercussions. Society will not be made better, but worse, because people will resort to depending on free money from the government instead of earning a living through a job or a career. Simply because they are constrained to act out in self-interest, and merely changing the environment with universal basic income will not make humans more virtuous. Instead, humans should work for income, which forces them to understand the value of their money. Take another example, universal healthcare. Such a concept is prized by those of the unconstrained vision. Living in a society where healthcare is provided for by the government means humans will not have to worry about healthcare costs. Many could live out better lives, spending more time to raise their families without having to possibly work more or harder to pay for healthcare. But many operating from the constrained vision see universal healthcare as a governmental nightmare. Government-run healthcare lacks incentives to be made better or more valuable. When healthcare is part of the market, people will work to improve it so they can get more customers and earn more for a living. A government monopoly on healthcare lacks market incentives to create a better system, because those in government positions do not need to improve the quality to earn a paycheck. There is also a fear humans constrained by self-interest will game the system. If healthcare is free, what incentive is there for people to stay healthy if they know the government will cover their healthcare costs? Couldn't people who are abnormally anxious about their health abuse the system by going to the doctor more than they actually need, since it won't cost them anything? All while wasting the precious time of doctors and healthcare staff. Instead, those of the constrained vision tend to prefer a market-based healthcare system, where healthcare providers have to compete with each other for income by keeping costs low while finding innovative ways to improve the quality. Customers will realize they have to pay for what they purchase and not abuse the system or overuse it. This type of healthcare system will obviously have imperfections, but given the constrained nature of humans, it is preferred over a government-run system that can be abused easily. Most importantly, those operating from the constrained vision do not agree with those of the unconstrained vision that merely providing a free service will result in humans living more virtuously. Merely having needs met doesn't modify the nature of humans. Now, this is not an attempt to advocate for one side or the other, but merely to compare how each side thinks when it comes to politics. Nor are we assuming one's view of human nature is the only factor that determines whether one leans right or left in politics. But we are suggesting that this is an important factor that is often overlooked. And we're hoping that if we can understand where each side is coming from, we can have better political conversations, instead of assuming our political opponents are spiteful bigots. Perhaps the reason the conservative you're speaking with rejects universal healthcare is not because he hates the poor or only cares about money. Perhaps the reason is because he has a different view of human nature and thinks people will act out in self-interest if given free handouts. Perhaps the reason the liberal you're talking with advocates for universal healthcare is not because she is stupid and wants to tax the middle class, taking away your hard-earned money so she can have more free things. Perhaps the reason is she thinks living in a world with free healthcare will result in a better world. Free healthcare will release us from the worries of healthcare costs, and without such pressures, we'll be able to progress towards a better society built on kindness and not greed. If we can focus on where each side is coming from when they advocate for the political views they do, we might be able to fix much of the polarization that has resulted in this country. We might be able to stop demeaning and insulting one another and instead try to work together for better solutions for all. Obviously, there is more work to do, but a step in the right direction is to try and understand the positions of both sides and why they think the way they do. If we're going to fix the political divide in this country, it will start when both sides stop shouting and start listening.